And we're going to kick this video off for the AFC and the NFC West with the AFC West with the Denver Broncos, who had a very Denver draft. They addressed their needs that they had well enough. There were some surprises for me along the way here. Some may be surprised or even upset by some of the decisions that they made. I will admit I was slightly surprised that they went cornerback first, but I did have cornerback as a need for them on my needs list, and they had a weak needs list. And what I mean by that is that they were prepared to attack the best player available throughout the draft quite comfortably without feeling like, oh, we absolutely have to address this need. I was a little bit surprised they didn't get any interior defensive line help, especially in such an interior defensive line draft, but they didn't absolutely need that once again. Those are my overview thoughts of here. Also, they took my favorite player in this entire draft, in Jahdae Barron. That earned them an A+ cornerback, slot corner. Sounds like they're going to do a little bit of both with him, which makes enough sense. I hope he doesn't struggle out on the perimeter, but we'll see about that. And then they went and they took, with their second round pick, R.J. Harvey. That earned a B+++ grade from me because I really thought this was a fit. Actually, I'm getting some word here from my producer that they're going to pull up some archaic footage from the archives from just prior to the Super Bowl this year. Let's get that played. I think that R.J. Harvey, if viewed by this team, it could be viewed as a different version of Taysom Hill. Not exactly Taysom Hill, but somebody who could bring you some of those Taysom Hill plays to the table. You can put him in at essentially the Wildcat and use him in some trickery, some trick plays, mess with the defenses a little bit, get Bo Nix out of there because I don't know, you just like to pull your quarterback off the field sometimes. With the rest of their draft, they went with wide receiver Pat Bryant in the third round. I thought this is when I say it's a very Denver Broncos draft. Pat Bryant is a very Sean Payton wide receiver, so I thought that was a great team fit, a little bit early from my board for him, but I'm sure they'll get the most out of him. And then in the third and fourth round, they went edge rusher back-to-back. Savion Jones first. That earned an F from me. I wasn't like a big Savion Jones fan, but I did like Q Robinson quite a bit. That's why we see that as an E+ grade there. A little bit early for me. He's quite raw, but there is a lot of upside that a lot of people saw, and a lot of people did have him ranked closer to in this range. So I don't want to call that a bad pick by any means. And then they finished the draft up in the 6th and 7th round with two guys that I have no familiarity with: punter Jeremy Crawshaw, and then tight end Caleb Lohner. If I were to choose a GIF, let's say, for this draft class, what might that look like? Well, I'll give you a little precursor before we play that GIF for you. I want to love the draft. My hormones go absolutely berserk when I look at this group of players and specifically where some of them were drafted. I feel like a teenager all over again looking at the entirety of their draft. That's how I feel. I'm confused. Do I love it or do I hate it? I don't know. I've never felt these kinds of feelings for a draft before. As you can see, I'm a little bit conflicted with this draft, but yeah, I'm going to tell you, Denver, there is a chance. Subjectively, I'm going to give this a B- right now, but once again, could be looking back in this in the future and saying, oh yeah, that was a pretty sweet draft. Player capital-wise, they were working with a pretty normal boat of players here that earned them a B. In the first 2 days of the draft, they got a C-, D+ for their grades from myself, and they finished it up with an E+ on average there. There was only one grade there. With Q Robinson, that counted for the third day of draft grades. With that, you can see it now. We got a B+, C+ overall draft grade for the Denver Broncos. Let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. Editing Steve here. Fun little tidbit. I just got back from a walk in the Florida hotness that it already is, and came in to edit this episode, and I'm editing away, and then I don't know what happened. The mic, everything went wacky I checked. I think I should be pretty good after a certain point, but you'll see when I'm me again. And if there are any quirks in the editing after that, it might be because there's a quirk here or there with the audio, kind of skipping or cutting out or both. So, or doubling up, all sorts of weird stuff. So, anyways, Kansas City Chiefs are up next. I love how this draft starts because it's just like what I did. My three biggest needs and the three things that I were getting them in some order, with the first, second, and when I did do a 3-round or more drafts, the 3rd-round pick, were almost always, the three biggest needs were interior defensive line, offensive tackle, and edge rusher. And once again, those were, what I was doing for this team basically every time that I was drafting for them. Then they got a bunch of other guys who I liked outside of the top 3, guys who I felt fell, guys who were my guys, that kind of story, guys who were fits for them as well. So just a big fan of this draft. We'll just start with that. Let's start with the vision and the carrying on the torch of this team, because there's a lot of these picks, actually pretty much all of these picks, you can see exactly how they fit into the big picture here. Now, Josh Simmons got an A- there. That's because of the knee injury. Very concerned about that. Obviously, they needed an offensive tackle, and a lot of people felt that he would have gone much higher if it wasn't for the knee injury. But he would have, I'm sure, gone much higher if it wasn't for the knee injury issue. I am still nervous about that, so that's behind the minus. But then with the second pick, they get defensive tackle Omar Norman-Lott. This is a guy who, when I was watching James Pierce, I noticed somebody else on the line was jumping quicker than him at the snap, and it was Omar Norman-Lott. So a guy who can bring a lot of pressure from the inside, from the interior to the defensive line. Who does that sound like that's on the Chiefs already? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's basically Chris Jones. So there's your future successor to Chris Jones, and in the meantime, you'll just have 2 Chris Joneses on the line. That's obviously asking a lot from Omar Norman-Lott, but you get the idea. They're going to be bringing, the plan is to be bringing a lot of pressure, which makes a lot of sense with given what happened to them in the Super Bowl. Monkey see, monkey do. You killed us, killed our offensive line. Let's go kill other people's offensive lines, and hopefully yours next time that we see you, is the plan there. Then edge rusher Ashton Gelati just kind of fits the mold of a Kansas City edge rusher, for better or worse, but I have no doubt that he should be all right. That was just a little bit early for me. Got a D grade. Cornerback Noel Williams there gets an A+ grade. Noel is my guy, and he has plenty of similarities to L'Jarius Sneed's play style. He's physical, he's good against the run, he's a good tackler, he's got shutdown potential, and he's got really good ball skills as well. So, obviously, a huge fan of that pick. A+ there. Wide receiver Jalen Knowles gets a B++. Jalen Knowles is a guy who can definitely perform the Rashee Rice roles, the Rashee Rice duties, whenever Rashee Rice isn't available, or in a couple of years or a year, whenever they want to, if they want to move on from Rashee Rice and not pay him, or if he just doesn't return to his form. That's always possible after injury. So, and it's just such a good value where they got him. I like linebacker Jeffrey Bassa quite a bit. Good, perfect, really value here at this point in the draft. Gave him a C. He earned a C grade at that point. And yeah, I mean, it's just a nice fit. He's got good leadership skills. Should be able to man up the kind of the front of that defense, the middle of that defense, I mean, quite well. And then you've got Brashard Smith taken in the 7th round. And what an excellent value that is, B+++. And that's one where it's really easy to see what this is. This is the Jerick McKinnon role, the receiving back of this team, and I think he should come in and do a wonderful job with that. And I think he should be able to take some carries off of Isaiah Pacheco's workload or whoever's. So, all in all, on the front of the newspaper, the title is "The Rich Get Richer," the headline. So, yeah, love this draft subjectively. Give it an S grade. In terms of the player capital, what do they get? 2 third-round grades there. That's definitely better than a 6th-round grade. That's an A- for my grading. And then from the 1st through the 3rd round, they averaged a B+ for the player grades, and obviously, 3 A's, 3 pluses, 1- there, and a D to pull that down. And on the 3rd day, they averaged a B, which is well above average there. We stick all that into the formula, and we get an A+. So, good job, Kansas City. Let's move on to a portion of the Las Vegas one before
we get back to my old self. And here we are with the Las Vegas Raiders. Look at that draft. Quite a few players. You can see down there in the player capital, S++. I don't know that you can get a better grade there for player capital. What is that? 3 third rounds, 2 fourths, and 3 sixths on top of the 7th, 2nd, and 1st. No fifths. So, yeah, that's a solid amount of player capital. I would have thought, with all of that capital, that they would have attacked the secondary a bit more than they did, than the one player that they got in the secondary, but it was a weakness in the draft, and that is something that I've wrote for multiple drafts throughout. This is, I would have thought that they would have attacked cornerback more, defensive backs more, etc. So, it does make enough sense, and they did bring in several, I think like 4 cornerbacks already, undrafted free agents, one of them being Mello Dotson, so we'll see what kind of gems that they're able to uncover from that group. Also, I've been doing what they did in the first 3 picks all offseason, literally. So you know that I like this draft. I've been giving them Ashton Jeanty at the first pick since the first mock draft that I did all the way through. I don't know how many times I explored something else. It definitely wasn't many. It was kind of like last year's Bo Nix pick, where I was like, I'm sorry, guys, you're going to get tired of this every draft, but this is the pick. That's how I felt about Ashton Jeanty here. So, we saw that plenty. And then I almost always went wide receiver next. Every now and then I would go like cornerback for this team second. Maybe I did cornerback once for the first pick with them, probably once or twice. But, in my pre-draft 7-round mock draft, once again, I went Ashton Jeanty, then I went wide receiver, Trey Harris, and then cornerback, Noah Williams, which I had Darian Porter higher up on my draft board than Noah Williams, so that works. And Jack Besh, I loved. He is my guy. So was Trey Harris, so I have no problem with taking Jack Besh instead. And somebody I know I gave them plenty of times was Jaden Higgins. I think they traded back as soon as Jaden Higgins was drafted, if I recall correctly, 258. That's got to be a trade back. I hope I covered everything that I need to cover here. Ashton Jeanty with an S-tier pick grade. Jack Besh got an A+, and Darian Porter, really, really solid, good cornerback, got a B. That's exactly where I thought he should get drafted, and he gets drafted right there. A fun little tidbit from the live stream that I want to share with you was after the wide receiver Jack Besh pick, I predicted something a little bit later in the draft, and so here's the footage from that. I assume that's probably what Jack Besh will do for Las Vegas, but they'll have some versatility. They might still want to get like a vertical speedster. They've got a guy who does fine in like the intermediate and short speed, but like maybe later on, if they could get Dante Thornton from Tennessee or something later, just a straight deep threat, that would really complete that room. Yeah, look at that. If you look at pick 108 on their draft board, Dante Thornton Jr., I called this freaking pick out. I love it. Great fit for them. E+. I didn't quite have him rated this high, so it was a little bit of a reach for me, but I'm perfectly fine with it. Obviously, I really like the team fit and everything. He was not my guy, so that is a plus for the team fit. Then we go back to day 2, and they finish off day 2 right near the end of round 3 with getting 2 offensive tackles in Caleb Rogers, Charles Grant. This is going to be a strategy you will see for them in this draft where they're getting 2-3 guys at positions, just attacking them hard in areas where they wanted to see improvement. So Caleb Rogers, bit of a reach for me. I liked Charles Grant more than him. I would have flipped these two, but they're literally back-to-back picks, so it doesn't matter. They're probably trying to put a bit of a chip on Charles Grant's shoulder, to be honest, by taking Caleb Rogers first. They think about that kind of thing. Both of them, my guys. Once again, one, a bit of a reach. Charles Grant, I think, also at a good value at that point. So it all equals out there between those two. Love the picks. Then we're going to skip over Dante Thornton, just talked about that. 2 defensive tackles with their next 2 picks. One in the 4th round in Tonka Hemingway. That's a bit of a reach for me, but then they get a decent value in the 6th round at pick 180 with defensive tackle J.J. Pegues. Different kinds of guys. Love the additions. Also in the 6th round, 2 more picks. Wide receiver Tommy Millard, I think a quarterback. I didn't really know any. I heard something about him, but outside of that, I never scouted him. And then quarterback Cam Miller was on my quarterbacks list to finish the 6th round up. E grade on that, a little bit of a reach there, but nothing too terrible. And with pick 222 in the 7th round, they went with linebacker Cody Lindenberg, and I thought this was a very strong value on him. I liked him. A+ to an A grade on that pick. At the end of the day, if I was an editor of a newspaper, or maybe like I'm on the radio, I'm going to say like, what are my feelings after this draft class? I would say that I'm excited to watch this offense again, especially if I'm a Las Vegas Raiders fan or a Raiders fan. When's the last time that someone said that about the Raiders? I can tell you it's before they moved to Las Vegas, I'm sure. So subjectively, I give this grade an S-. My biggest issue would be the lack of an additional help for their secondary, which once again, understandable given how this draft unfolded and the NFL's thoughts on the secondary players in this draft. When it comes to the player capital, they had the best player capital in this draft, S++. It graded out incredibly well on my player capital system that I use. On days 1 and 2, they earned an A- grade for the average player grade, and the average player grade on day 3 was a C- to a D+. We take this all into consideration, and that S++ and that S- are holding a lot of weight here. They end up with an S- overall grade for the Las Vegas Raiders, a very, very good draft for them. Let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers. Top-down view of this draft. Not the best job of, but a good job of attacking their needs. That's how I feel about that. They took 2 upside swings to possibly upgrade their safety at the end of this draft. I thought that was smart of them to do. I kind of felt like either draft a safety in those, day 1 or day 2 picks, or you do something like that where you take 2 swings at it and you hope that you hit with one of them, because they don't necessarily have to improve at the safety position, but it's one of those things where I write the wording upside swing, or I write only take a strong player at this position, because basically it's like you can improve here potentially, but I wouldn't be trying to draft a 4th or 5th round like low floor, high floor, low ceiling kind of guy, because you already have that. That's how I feel about that. Also, when it comes to defensive backs, they did not draft a cornerback. That's a bit of a surprise for me here, but they did hit the undrafted free agency cornerback market real hard. So you like that? That doesn't affect the grade here, but just a side note there. Then we look at the players that they took at the top of this draft, and I like this draft, okay? So running back Omarion Hampton, that earns an A grade. This is where I had him. I think he was the 20th player on my big board, maybe 19th actually on draft day. Then, picked 55, their wide receiver Trey Harris, that earns them an S+. And to finish off their first 2 days of draft, defensive tackle Jamari Caldwell, somebody who wasn't quite a my guy, but a borderline my guy, earned them a B+. Thought the value was pretty much right on there with where they drafted him. When it comes to Omarion Hampton, the comp that I had for him was a juiced up Najee Harris. They've already got Najee Harris on the roster. It makes sense that they would like they would have liked Omarion Hampton and did end up drafting him there based on types of player, and those two together are going to just be like a big hammer that they're going to be swinging away at other opposing defenses all game long. So I like that. That fits the kind of strategy, the game plan type that they're building there with the Chargers. And then the next pick, Trey Harris. Back-to-back years here where they're getting one of my favorite wide receivers in the entire draft. Trey Harris, once again, just a big fan of him, and I think exactly what they needed. So this should have been an S++, because this is a perfect fit for them, and he is a my guy. So great job there of getting Trey Harris. Also, when we look at day 2, kind of excited about some of these guys. Kyle Kennard, edge rusher. A lot of people had him around this. I thought it was a little bit of a reach there, but he is a guy who can give you some juice if he turns out. So you like that. Wide receiver Keandre Lambert-Smith, talking about them drafting guys that fit their the mold of what they're trying to build there. Keandre Lambert-Smith is perfect, high floor, low ceiling kind of guy, going to be around the league for some time, I think. Was a my guy, C+ grade there. And also in the 5th round, love their 5th round, they go with tight end Orlando Gadsden II. I thought this was good value at this point in the draft for him, and he is somebody who I am very excited to see how they end up utilizing him. and makes me want to watch some of their games this season. Then in the 6th round, they hit offensive tackle Branson Taylor, who I'm not familiar with, and then the safeties to finish that up. So, all in all, we come away from this draft. What am I writing at the top? Headline of the newspaper: this offense is about to go off. I truly believe that. I like these additions that they brought into this offense with what they've already have and what they lost in terms of especially Keandre Lambert-Smith for that wide receiver room. Subjectively, I felt like they earned an A-, B+, borderline totally in love with this thing. Player capital-wise, they earned an A. When it comes to the grading there on day 1 and 2, A+ to A, and day 3, they earned a B- on average grade for those player grades. We put that into the formula, and it kicks out an A- grade, and I think that's about perfect. This was a really good draft. Good capital used up there. Bringing in more bodies here. They needed that, so I really do like this for them. Let's go on to wrapping up this division. That's how they stack up, folks. The Las Vegas Raiders killed it with their S- grade. I think that might be the strongest grade we've had so far in these videos. Kansas City right behind them with an A+ overall grade for their draft. The Chargers, an A- grade, still very strong. And the Denver Broncos, B-, C+. We'll see how this draft grade goes out for them. Definitely a Sean Payton draft. There's no doubt about that, and I think when you hear that, you can go to bed a little bit comfortable despite the grade there, Denver. With no transition whatsoever, we're going to move on to the NFC with Arizona first, and I thought that they did a nice job of attacking their needs, and when you look at the pluses, they do have a high percentage of my guys, and you look at the grades, or guys who I thought were they found at a good value. This is another one of those drafts where I feel strongly that I am in agreement with where they started this draft. In the first round, they take defensive tackle Walter Nolan. That gets them an A+ grade. And anytime that I was not drafting cornerback Will Johnson for them with that first pick, I was drafting most often a defensive tackle, maybe even an edge rusher. Maybe once I gave them a wide receiver just to point out that that was possible. And pretty exclusively there for defensive tackle in the first round, it would have been one of these 3 names, mostly one of these 2 names in Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon, because I knew that they wanted to bring in somebody who was disruptive and could get after the quarterback. That is something that they highlighted that they knew that they needed to get better at this offseason. Or Kenneth Grant, just because, I mean, he's really good and he has a solid disruptive ceiling as well, though out of those 3, I think his ceiling as a disruptor the lowest. Or I drafted them, like I said, Will Johnson the most probably with that first round pick, and instead they get him in the 2nd round. S-tier grade there, great value in the 2nd round on Will Johnson, hopefully. We'll get to that in a little bit as well, but then they finish up their 2nd day, and the 3rd round with edge rusher Jordan Burch. That got a B+ grade from me. He was not quite a my guy, but I did like him quite a bit as well. Then in the 4th round, I would say this is one of those things where had they got him in the 4th or 5th round, I would have been putting a plus there. You know, if it was a C grade, I would have made sure to just give it a full plus. That brings us on to linebacker Cody Simon, who they took in day 3 to start off that day. Another my guy type kind of linebacker, hits a need for them as well nicely, E+. Then cornerback Denzel Burke in the 5th round. I thought at this point in the draft, decent value for what the potential is with Denzel Burke. Guard Hayden Connor, 6th round. They're drafting some traits there. I thought this was a little bit high, but whatever, F- grade there. And if there's ever a position where feel free to disagree with me, 6th, 7th round types of offensive linemen, go right ahead and disagree with me on those guys. And then in the 7th round, they went ahead and they took safety Keaton Crawford, one of my favorite late guys that I hadn't heard about until really late in the process, but quickly grew on me. Highly athletic guy, B+ grade here. Thought solid talent, solid value. He was a top 5 safety for me in this draft. B+, once again, my guy. So we look at this draft, and I think that ultimately it was a risky draft, and the question is, will it pay off? That's what I'm putting as my headline in the newspaper to try to get some people to read my analysis on this draft. Walter Nolan, boom bust talent, okay? High motor, some plays, doesn't play so hard. Ends up on his butt more often than you would like, but you know what? He's young and growing into his body, and ultimately he has the highest ceiling of any interior defensive lineman in this class because of the positive plays when you see those. And he's probably going to take a little bit of time to grow into that. There's also some off-field concerns, attitude-wise, character concerns, including the taking some plays off. Then in the second round, you go Will Johnson, health concerns. That's something that it sounds like could end his career much earlier than you would want. Then edge rusher Jordan Burch, talked about that a little bit. I didn't quite feel like he was a high floor guy, which is part of why I didn't make him a my guy. I also didn't quite think that his ceiling highest, also not quite in my guy, but I do like the combination of a decently high floor, a decent ceiling, just not A tier in either one of those kind of categories, if you get what I'm trying to say there. Then when it comes to Denzel Burke, he's coming off of a year where if he wasn't Denzel Burke, if he wasn't so highly touted coming out of high school and played for Ohio State, he might have gone undrafted. But he does have this really high pedigree. He did have a much better 2023 than he did 2024, but there is risk there with given how he played most recently. Then, to finish this off, Keaton Crawford, like I said, high ceiling, athletic type of guy, but there is plenty room to not develop and not end up on a roster at all, in the 7th round especially. So, riskier draft class here, but it can go a number of ways in terms of how good these players are going to end up being, and for that reason, I do give this an A++. I really like the upside swing. That's what this roster needs. They've done a nice job of building a decent floor, and their coaching is good, solid. They need some sprinkles of big-time upside, and that's what they did here. So I like that a lot. Like I said, subjective A++ grade when it comes to the player capital. Average B, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. That gets you a B. For the grading for the players that they grabbed in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round, A+ to A grade there. And for the rest of the players, a C- to a D+ grade for them on average. And that brings us to an overall grade of an A- for the Arizona Cardinals. And I think that fits here. A little bit of maybe more risk than I want to take it, or like at pick 78, could we have gotten another guy with a big juiced ceiling that would have gotten me all really excited about the potential for this draft class? I'm still pretty excited about it, right? And this is a draft that I'm on board with the strategy here. They attempted to execute my plan that I had done, the plan that the Houston Texans did execute, which was to trade back for a wide receiver. Jaden Higgins was drafted before their pick, however. The guy who they reportedly did have their eye on that they were going to pick if he was available, Jaden Higgins, so then they just traded back again, which is something that I always advocate doing. Trade back. If your target doesn't slip to you, or if you had multiple targets and none of them do, just trade back again to the next spot where your next target should land. I hit the head on the nail with that game plan for the Los Angeles Rams, almost, but of course it didn't quite go to plan. Also, I missed their target. Not a surprise that they liked Jaden Higgins, and obviously the NFL felt similar to me. He was my 23rd ranked player overall. Jack Besh. I thought Jack Besh was going to be like the apple of their eyes specifically. Then at pick 46, they take tight end Terrence Ferguson, another guy who I was much higher on than consensus. Wish I would have gotten him just a little bit higher in my grading, so that way I could have given him an A. But yeah, this was a little bit early for me. Part of the reason that I have my tight ends just a little bit lower graded because of the position. That's all. So that's why this gets a B+. Just a little bit lower on like the value of the position there that they took. Nonetheless, my guy, very excited about his potential, and there's a path to him obviously starting very quickly for that team and fantasy players. I think he is somebody worth getting on your team. For the rest of their draft, I'm in love with this draft. There's no questions, unlike the Denver Broncos draft, where I'm like, how am I feeling? I mean, edge rusher Josiah Stewart, I absolutely loved him. They get him in the 3rd round, A+. I think that was a bit of a good value. Then in the 4th round, same thing. Jarquez Hunter, I like him a lot, A+. I had him and Damian Martinez in like the same kind of tier early on in the offseason. Once again, Damian Martinez rose a little bit, Jarquez Hunter fell a little bit throughout the offseason, but I did originally have, after the first time that I watched this running back class, Jarquez Hunter ranked ahead of Damian Martinez. Then in the 5th round, defensive tackle Ty Hamilton, got them an F- for that. Just took him a little too high, and I just wasn't really like a huge Ty Hamilton fan. I never quite got him. 5th round also, linebacker Chris Paul Jr., good value at this point. Wasn't quite a my guy, somebody who I always felt like I was pushing him up my board instead of putting him exactly where I wanted him. But I think that like I said, not a my guy, but I liked him a lot. So, and there's reasons for that. He's a really tough player, and that's going to be the overall view of the entirety of this draft group. One of the first 3 words that comes to your mind when you talk about all of these guys, if not the first word for several of them, is going to be toughness. Terrence Ferguson, he is a receiving tight end, but he's a dude. He's a dog. Same with Josiah Stewart. He's a complete dog. The rest of his team says that he is the guy who was the toughest on the entire Michigan roster. Jarquez Hunter, he's a dude. He is not afraid to get in some physical contact with guys. And then Ty Hamilton, I know one of the words to describe him is that he is a tough dude. Chris Paul Jr., he's a little bit undersized, and this is part of the flaw in his game. He's unwilling to... He used to go around guys. Then he got some feedback from his coaching staff about what he could improve on to help his NFL draft stock, and they said that he needed to get tougher, and so since then, he just goes right into dudes, no matter what size they are. And then in the 7th round, wide receiver Kanata Mumfield, C+ grade on this. This was one of those fun draft picks where just 2 picks prior to that, I had been talking about how, was this the pick? Or is this the pick that caused me to talk about somebody else? Whatever. Forget that story. Really high floor type of guy. Knew that he would get drafted at some point in this draft because of that. He's a dirty worker kind of guy. A wide receiver 4 on any roster. Probably never going to be a wide receiver 2 or 1 for a team, but can fill in when needed and will have a role. C+ grade there. He was a my guy as well. All in all, my thoughts on this draft grade, low key, like I talked about, they got a group of tough dudes. Subjectively, gave this an A+. Player capital wise, they weren't working with the most. C value there, a little bit below average, unfortunately. When it comes to those first 2 days of the draft, on average, those player grades came to an A-, and on day 3, they averaged out to a C, which is perfectly average. That's what you should technically grade out to if you're taking guys at value for where I had them graded. So, put this into my magical formula, and it comes out to a B+ grade here for the Los Angeles Rams. As you know, subjectively, I feel much stronger, but yeah, they didn't get the most shots at things here, but you know what? They've done that in a couple of years past, and I love these pieces that they added. I had edge rusher as a team need for them, as an area that they could improve, and they got the perfect guy. I just love it so much. Let's go on to the San Francisco 49ers. And the first thing that I do when I look at all the positions that they drafted here in San Francisco is to say that I would be surprised that they didn't attack the offensive line more until the 7th round. But, frankly, I'm not surprised that they didn't. There's a heck of a lot of potential for the San Francisco 49ers in this draft, so you love that. I also think that it was very important for them to bring in a high number of players, and they did that as well. As you can see, player capital graded S+. You can't get higher than that. They had not the most capital that you can literally have, but in terms of my grading, they got up there. Quick recap of their draft. Let's look at it. Edge rusher Michael Williams earns him a B grade in the 1st round. 2nd round, go Alfred Collins, A+. My guy, loved them. Great fit, great need. Linebacker Nick Martin in the 3rd round, F grade. Knew he was going to get drafted high because basically every team looked at him as a top 30 or a 30 draft grade. They brought him in out of one of 30 players that they would be able to bring in and look at pre-draft. Also in the 3rd round with pick 100, they went cornerback Upton Stout. This was also high for me, but he was kind of a my guy-ish and definitely a team fit here. Then in the 4th round, they went with nose tackle C.J. West and wide receiver Jordan Watkins. Loved the C.J. West pick. Thought that was a good value on him. Jordan Watkins wasn't so high on him. Thought that was early for him. Then in the 5th round, 2 more picks. Running back Jordan James and safety Marquise Sigley. Marquise Sigley, first off the bat, they're A++. Loved the pick. Thought it was a good value. Thought he's a good team pick. And they've been taking a lot of secondary guys that I like quite a bit in recent years, so let's see how that turns out for them. And then, of course, I mean, they have to take a running back every draft. C plus C grade on that one. Not quite a my guy, but kind of close to a my guy. In the 7th round, they had 3 more picks. Quarterback, Curtis Rourke. Can't argue with that. Thought that was a good value at that point, so nice pick for them. Guard, Connor Colby. Once again, appropriate value for that pick. That earns him a C. And then they finished with the wide receiver who I know nothing about in Junior Bergen. When it comes to the entirety of this draft, I do like it a lot. But I would have done things a little bit differently. That's why they get a subjective grade of a B. So let's see what I would have done differently here. With that 3rd round pick, instead of Nick Martin, I would have grabbed cornerback Sovone Revel. That would have gotten me an A+ grade based on my board. And then I would have traded up real quickly for a guard. Like I said, thought that they should have helped that offensive line a little bit earlier on in this draft. And Dylan Fairchild's the next one to go after pick 100, or after around pick 80, sometime after that. So we trade up for the next guard, trading picks 113 and 100. That's CJ West, Upton Stout. That was an F+ and an A grade. We get a D++ grade. And then at 147, I would have let things go at the running back position. Personally, I'd have taken nose tackle Yaya Black there. Actually, I wouldn't have, but I needed to grab them a nose tackle. And then in the 7th round, we needed a linebacker yet, as we passed up on Nick Martin earlier. We get Carson Bruner. He wasn't my guy. That would have earned us a B+ grade. And then, because we traded up, I couldn't fill every position there. Running back was the position that I pushed off, and ultimately would have been able to get one of 2 of all 3 of these undrafted free agents, and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt might have fallen then if we would have drafted one less running back in this draft. Lan Larison was available after the draft, same with Corey Kiner, who is somebody that they did bring in as an undrafted free agent. However, that's not how the draft went. This is how the draft went. Subjective, B grade. Player capital, they had great amount of capital, which was what they needed. S+ for that player capital. Through days 1 and 2, on average, those player grades came out to a C-/D+, and the rest of the players averaged a B-C+ player grade. Put that into the formula, and they had a borderline A-/B+ type of grade there. So a strong draft class here for San Francisco, regardless of the fact that I might have done things a little bit differently. That's going to bring us on to the Seattle Seahawks draft to wrap this up. This is how you retool, and this is how you retool quickly. I'm going to compare this to going to a thrift store and getting an absolute haul, because I feel like that's just, I don't know why, but that's how the analogy that came to my mind when I looked at this draft. First of all, and it's because of the variety of things that they hit here, and I thought that they got a lot of guys at good value, and they got a lot of my guys, and they got a lot of, things that you need, as well as a couple of flashy pieces. Just, once again, one of those drafts where they hit in a lot of different areas and a lot of different ways. Sometimes you get a ceiling, sometimes you get a high floor. So this starts off with guard/center prospect Gray Zabel with their 1st round pick. Hits a need, hits a system fit to a T, and hits a my guy to a T. A+++. If I could have given this an S tier grade, I would have obviously tried getting as close as I could there. And they go in. This is where you splurge on, I don't know, you don't have a pair of jeans, okay? So you splurge on a pair of jeans that not only is going to last a long time, a sturdy pair of jeans, but also it's a fashionable, it's a big name label that's sitting there that was just brought in by some rich family or something that dropped it off at the thrift store. And it's a great deal, but also it is a good chunk of your budget that you came in with, because of course the draft is a budget. So that's why we went to the thrift store. And like I said, we're starting off with just a piece of clothing that we need, that will last a long time, that we know is gonna be there when we need it to be there and do its job. That's gonna bring us on to the 2nd round pick here in safety, Nick Emanwari. They went out and they got another designer piece that they found. I don't know, what is this, it's an accessory. Is this a watch, maybe, that was at the thrift store? Do they have watches at thrift stores? I don't know. Maybe they stopped at the pawn store on the way and they picked up a fancy watch for a good price. Not a good price. I think they overpaid for it a little bit. But whatever the case here. C grade on that. A little bit of an overpay, but flashy. People are going to say, ooh, you got a bonus in your paycheck last month, didn't you? And then You go in the second round, they also pick up tight end Elijah Arroyo. To me, maybe another flashy piece here, not going to be doing the hard work for them, but does fit a bit of a need. I don't know, what is this? A nicer pair of glasses. You don't get that at the thrift store. I'm going off. You get the idea of what I'm saying here. Then you get quarterback Jalen Milroe, a little bit more of that, but also fitting a need. And then nose tackle Riley Mills in the 5th round here, and Torrey Horton, wide receiver. Guys who I think are good players that you get at a really good value. That's back to the thrift store kind of idea here. These are my guys. F+ for Riley Mills, B+ for Torrey Horton. By the way, Jalen Milroe gave that a B grade. I thought that was perfect value, and Elijah Arroyo was solid value there, a little bit of an overpay, and not quite a my guy, because I think he's a little bit of a one-trick pony. He's really good at going deep and attacking deep, and he's really good at playing in the slot as a slot wide receiver. Don't really think he's so great in line. Don't really think he's so great the closer to the line of scrimmage the route is. So those are my concerns with Elijah Arroyo. Of course, he's got all the tools, though, to develop from there. And then we go back to the thrift store, and we've done all this splurging and found a couple of great t-shirts that we really like a lot in Torrey Horton and Riley Mills that we just needed to add to our closet. And we're going to get another pair. I don't know, what is this, like a pair of underwear or long underwear for the cold weather? Maybe you work outside here. Fullback / tight end Robbie Outs. Look at the dude. He's the widest dude ever. He's even wider, I think, than Jonas Evanaya, but they could have a wideness contest. He is going to do some dirty work for you. Bring the Kyle Juszczyk of this offense is what you're getting in Robbie Outs. Different, but that's the type of thing that you could think of when you think of this pick. F+. I loved him. I wanted to put him higher in my rankings. I really didn't think he was going to get drafted, or I thought he would get drafted by a team like San Francisco right at the end of the draft. Klint Kubiak coming from the same coaching tree from San Francisco, the Shanahan coaching tree, so it makes a lot of sense that they would bring in that kind of player. In the 6th round, offensive tackle Bryce Campbell-Dew, F+. I didn't really recognize the name, but I did have some notes on him. I liked him. I thought he was a nice fit for them. Scheme fit, I think, is what got me the plus there. And then in the 7th round, a few picks. Starting off with running back Damian Martinez. Did they need another running back? Did they need, I don't know, another pair of sweatpants? Not necessarily, but you know what? The sweatpants were sweet and such a good deal. You know, I don't know, $100 pair of sweatpants for like $4 here. Like, sweet. Let's take it. Why not? We got plenty of them. Don't care. We use them all. That's to bring us on to the offensive tackle here, Mason Richmond. Not familiar with, but whatever. And then wide receiver Ricky White, helping out the special teams here with Ricky White, most likely. So once again, just getting one of those pieces. I don't know, some nice, a pair of business slacks or something for cheap, or some long socks, some business socks, so when they show that they look nice. I don't know. You know, you get the idea here. Subjectively, give him an A-. Really big fan of the budget shopping job that they did here. Then for player capital, they did, once again, it's a quick retool. That gets them an S- for their grading on average for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round. That got them a B, and the rest of the players on average graded out to a C-, D+. Really, really strong draft from them. A, roughly, A-. The reason the A is bigger is because it was closer to an A grade-wise. That is it. Thank you so much for tuning on in. Take care. There are 3 other videos that I already filmed and put out there into the world, so go check those out. Links might be in the description. Oh, dear Lord. I turned everything off, and then I realized the last slide I was on was not the last slide of this presentation. I already turned the camera off, so too late for that. But NFC West, how does it stack up? Seattle had my favorite draft, or my best graded draft out of this group. A-. Right behind them, the Arizona Cardinals, A-. San Francisco, right behind them with an A- / B+. And right behind them, the Los Angeles Rams with a B+. So strong drafts all the way around. All in all, I mean, the AFC and the NFC West absolutely killed it. Definitely had the best group of drafts out of all of the 4 videos that I made. So check those other ones out once again, and peace out. Thank you so much for tuning on in. Definitely should give it a like if you made it this far. Bye-bye.